This year, I watched 176 movies. Problem is, only 5 of those were new. Arrival, Midnight Special, Neon Demon, Fantastic Beasts, and Sausage Party. My New Year's resolution is going to be to go to the theater more, but in the meantime I want to share with you what I feel are some underappreciated films that may have slipped under your radar. This is my year in movies, top hidden gems. Let's start off with my top 5 favorite period pieces.
10 seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2.
We cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. Good night and good luck.
Number 5 is Good Night and Good Luck. After seeing this and Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, I'm convinced that George Clooney is just as good behind the camera as he is in front of it. The civics lessons of this film remain just as important today as they did during the Red Scare. David Strathairn, who's in The Bourne Ultimatum, Howl, and Godzilla, won an Oscar nomination for his flawless portrayal of Edward R. Murrow and his fight against McCarthyism. The movie's classified as a docudrama, seamlessly blending fictional exchanges and compelling stock footage.
When it feels scary to jump, that is exactly when you jump. Otherwise, you end up staying in the same place your whole life. And that I can't do.
Number 4 favorite period piece I've seen this year is A Most Violent Year. Oscar Isaac plays a New York fuel supplier who has to deal with all manner of corruption while protecting his family. This movie's a period piece, but in a minimal way. It doesn't use a dated soundtrack or other cheap throwbacks to remind you that it's 1981. Instead, director J.C. Chandor employs a bleak, rusty minimalism in shooting New York that reminds you of its seedier, bygone days.
What is the secret of Hanging Rock? And who will it claim next?
Number 3 is Picnic at Hanging Rock. Peter Weir was part of the Australian New Wave, and went on to direct big studio movies like Master and Commander, Dead Poets Society, and The Truman Show. Australian New Wave movies like Picnic at Hanging Rock contrast the stuffiness of white settlers with the untamed wilderness of the outback. According to Wikipedia, the dainty aesthetic apparently influenced Sofia Coppola's style in The Virgin Suicides and Marie Antoinette. The movie drags in places, but it's an atmospheric must-see for people who like the ambiguousness of a creepy mystery. Number 2 is The Way Back. This is another movie by Peter Weir, this time about the intrepid escape of Siberian gulag prisoners. Like Picnic at Hanging Rock, nature plays a big part in the story. It's produced by National Geographic, which doesn't come as a surprise when you see all the breathtaking vista shots in remote locations. Survival movies find their strength in the little moments of hope among the peril, and Peter Weir is great at pacing these little victories that keep the audience invested.
Cause our love don't exist when a boy wanna play so.
My number 1 favorite period piece I've seen this year is Slow West. Slow West is like the Coen brothers meets Dead Man. A lot of gunslinging violence is executed to comedic effect, but humor doesn't take away from the harsh realities the young main character has to face in the Old West. A great supporting cast backs up Michael Fassbender, especially perpetual bad guy Ben Mendelsohn, who plays an absinthe-soaked bounty hunter. This is one of my favorite not-so-old-timey westerns to date and a renaissance of the genre. It rocked Sundance last year, and it's plain to see why. Now it's time for my top 5 favorite hidden gem documentaries I've seen in 2016.
Let me just be brutally honest with you. There's no chance to win anymore.
Thought it was going pretty well.
It's really apocalyptic right now. But at a certain point, you've got to say, look, I don't quit.
Number 5 is Weiner. I promise there will be no puns, the fruit hangs too low, but it becomes clear that Congressman Anthony Weiner isn't the bad guy of the filmmaker's story, even though we see him at his absolute worst. Instead, the focus is on the tabloid nature of DC and its sociopath residents. Pushy reporters, megalomaniac pundits, and graying career politicians all butt heads with Weiner, and it's cathartic to see him fight back. This documentary has more sensational confrontation than an episode of Jerry Springer, and a sharp wit to boot.
Knowing that the odds were stacked against me, I resorted to witchcraft.
Number 4 is Lost Soul, the doomed journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau. All documentaries about failed productions share one big thing: egos. Juicy stories about how Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer plagued the shoot live in infamy. Egos also bring with them a flock of suits whose job it is to minimize the risk on their A-list investments. And it's clear from the beginning that director Richard Stanley couldn't handle all these cooks in the kitchen. He has the vibe of Aleister Crowley, or a guy LARPing on a college quad. Not exactly the shrewd business type. It seems like everyone but Stanley knew the production would be a disaster, but stuck around anyway just to watch it burn and collect per diem. The movie runs off a morbid curiosity to see just how bad things will get, like when you can't look away from a car crash.
Si a mí me enseñaste a ser rebelde, a discutir por la revolución, me voy a fajar contigo en el sentido de que me dejes correr carro.
Number 3 is Havana Motor Club. Havana Motor Club chronicles the efforts of a Cuban community in putting on the first official race since the 1959 revolution. It's a sports movie, a historical film, and a human interest piece all in one. By the end, you feel like you've gotten to know this tight-knit community held together by their national pride and love of racing. There's nothing like seeing the pride on each racer's face when they talk about the old cars they've worked tirelessly to restore.
We cannot surrender being rude, funny, obnoxious truth tellers.
I can't think of anybody that I respect more than Barry. He's a reminder that you do have power.
No matter what they do, I'm a witness to what you can go on to become. Call me lucky.
Number 2 is Call Me Lucky. Director Bobcat Goldthwait introduces Barry Crimmins as a raging political satirist in the vein of Bill Hicks, but as the movie continues, we learn that abuse lies at the source of Crimmins' anger, not just a keen sense for bullshit. His story is a transition from caustic comedian to full-blown activist. Only a man of Barry's mental and physical stature can make powerful institutions seem feeble in comparison. Compelling at every moment, Call Me Lucky is a gem of a biopic that elicits both outrage and empathy.
People did not do this film because they were afraid of his imagination.
This is a movie that has its fingerprints all over so many other movies. Blade Runner, William Gibson, Matrix.
Giger, he make the monster of Alien. And Hollywood start to use my group.
It always leads back to Jodorowsky.
Could be fantastic, no?
My number 1 favorite documentary I've seen this year is Jodorowsky's Dune. This documentary explores Chilean experimental director Alejandro Jodorowsky's big studio sci-fi flop that was his visionary interpretation of the book Dune. I know absolutely nothing about the novel, and have only seen one Jodorowsky movie, but I had a blast watching this. There are juicy anecdotes about Jodorowsky schmoozing giants like Orson Welles and Salvador Dali to be in his movie, and with these giants came giant egos and giant demands, as the budget began to reach astronomical proportions. This finally spelled doom for the entire production. You'll see some fantastic concept art by the likes of Mobius and H.R. Geiger that you can't see elsewhere. Give it a look. Top 5 Hidden Gem Thrillers.
In the House of Games, there's no one you can trust.
Who brought the damn cop?
Not even yourself. Lindsay Krause, Joe Mantegna, in David Mamet's House of Games.
Number 5 is House of Games. Whoever's seen Joe Mantegna in Criminal Minds knows he's charming in a schlubby kind of way, perfect casting for a con man. Lindsay Krause gives a determined performance as the psychiatrist who gets swept up in a world of grifts. Her character is well developed and morally ambiguous, something you wouldn't expect from David Mamet, given that his works usually focus on male group dynamics. House of Games is a well-crafted thriller with edge and class.
Une histoire passionnante.
Number 4 is Les Samurai. If you enjoy movies like Drive and Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai, you'll love the one that started it all. Criterion describes it as a razor-sharp cocktail of 1940s American gangster cinema and 1960s French pop culture with a liberal dose of Japanese lone warrior mythology. That's a mouthful, but it's the best description I could find. Director Jean-Pierre Melville employs a starkly minimal cool that matches the performance of the silent assassin played by Alain Delon.
All right, boys, it's howdy doody time.
Number 3 is Cold in July. Cold in July is a grisly, no-frills thriller with a sweet, juicy twist. Not the sort of dazzling M. Night Shyamalan twist that happens at the end, but a big event in the middle of the film that drastically changes the dynamic. In this way, it's like two movies in one, where both parts are equally satisfying. It seamlessly incorporates elements from horror, noir, and western genres. Sam Shepard, Michael C. Hall, and Don Johnson were all great casting choices. Number 2 is Shotgun Stories. Jeff Nichols' Shotgun Stories quietly builds on itself until the anticipation is palpable. A working-class Hatfields and McCoys for the modern era, it runs the gamut of human emotions. Watch this movie for Michael Shannon's performance. It's restrained and eerily captivating. I recommend this movie if you liked other country noir movies like Blue Ruin, Joe, and Mud.
I am the last guy you want to mess with. You get paid what I say. You do what I say.
You don't know from one day to the next whether you're going to be killed, go home, or get busted.
What's wrong with you?
James Caan. Thief.
My number 1 favorite thriller I've seen this year is Thief. Nicholas Wingdings Refn borrowed heavily from Thief in Drive, but Ryan Gosling's silent driver bears little similarity to James Caan's character, save his slick professionalism. Frank is a grizzled, streetwise New Yorker who doesn't take any guff, and doesn't have the time to spare for anyone's feelings, but he still has a certain Ashkenazi charm about him. Caan's explosive performance is right up there with Cagney and Brando. Director Michael Mann employs a pink and blue neon style that he would later use for movies like Manhunter, and it wouldn't be a Michael Mann movie without a cuffed white khakis beach scene, the definition of 80s cool. Thief is a perfect marriage of style and substance. Also, check out the cool synth soundtrack by Tangerine Dream. Top 5 Hidden Gem Horror Films. Number 5 is Kil List. I love movies that are creepy in a very specific way without expressly falling into the horror genre. Sometimes symbolism and occult undertones can be more effective than an explicit supernatural approach. I also love writers that are bold enough to make a story where every character has almost no redeeming qualities. It's a daunting task to make it watchable when the audience can't root for a single soul on screen, but Ben Wheatley pulls it off with black humor, swift violence, and the power of suggestion. Many have compared it to the 1973 Wicker Man, but Wheatley says the idea came from his childhood, saying, "Things like cults in the woods and the tunnels is all stuff I've had as a recurring nightmare since I was little. I used to live near the woods, so that kind of side of it comes from there, because a lot of people keep talking about the Wicker Man, and it's a reference point, but it wasn't the Wicker Man itself that scared me. These things culturally are quite close to the surface in the UK. Pretty creepy stuff." Number 4 is Carnival of Souls. One of the first independent horror films, Carnival of Souls was formative for the genre. David Lynch was inspired by the use of ambient noise and dreamlike quality, not to mention the idea of a small town harboring a dark presence. George Romero confirmed that he watched it before making Night of the Living Dead. You can see how the ghouls that chase down Mary in this sequence influenced his zombies. The creepy organ soundtrack and genuinely ominous abandoned carnival locale make this gothic American classic a chilling watch for even the most seasoned horror fan. Number 3 is Baskin. There's something for every type of horror fan in Baskin. It's similar to From Dusk Till Dawn in that the mood completely changes halfway through. It starts off as an artsy-fartsy mood film, then turns into a Hieronymus Bosch cesspool. The first half looks like Nicholas Wingdings Refn directed it, and the second feels like Slipknot took over. Luckily, the parts aimed at gorehounds still maintain a lot of stylistic integrity, so you don't feel like you're just watching torture porn or something. There's also a cool synthwave soundtrack, so nostalgic fans of Stranger Things and It Follows will be rewarded. If you're a horror fan, don't miss this gem straight out of Turkey. Number 2 is Spring. Spring by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead has a huge advantage over most sci-fi horror movies simply because the characters are likable. The first scene emotionally hooks the viewer right away and doesn't let up from there. Because we're invested in the characters, the conversation-centered dialogue doesn't come off as self-indulgent. As Justin Benson said in an interview, you don't have good characters without spending a lot of time with them, being normal human beings and saying normal human being stuff. This film is definitely a mood piece, with its beautiful locales and haunting score. It may be one of my favorite sci-fi movies of the decade next to Under the Skin and Ex Machina. My number 1 favorite horror hidden gem I've seen this year is The Tenant. The Tenant is a lesser-known, more culty Roman Polanski thriller. It has many of the same themes as Rosemary's Baby, what with its feeling of claustrophobia and sexual unease. That's Roman Polanski on the poster as the mousy tenant. He smartly casts himself in a role that doesn't require a lot of screen presence or charm, and he's a solid enough actor anyway. The movie was reviewed poorly upon its release in the US, but in recent years many have given it more praise as a genuinely creepy entry in the informal apartment trilogy of Rosemary's Baby, Repulsion, and The Tenant. There's almost no gore in the movie, but a couple of painful to watch sequences will be etched in your memory. Finally, my 5 favorite foreign hidden gems I've seen in 2016. Number 5 is Once Upon a Time in Anatolia. Director Nuri Bilge Ceylan slowly unravels a tale of a group of Turkish officials and civilians conducting a nighttime search for a buried homicide victim. Ceylan, who's a Turkish director, makes ruminating dramas that slowly unfold against harsh landscapes. The long takes and leisurely pace reminded me of his recent Winter Sleep, but it's more like memories of murder in its black humor and conflicting motivations of its central characters. Check out this one if you like moody police procedurals. Number 4 is Revanche. Austrian director Götz Spielmann directs this tragic thriller about a Viennese criminal and a Ukrainian prostitute who rob a bank, leading to unforeseen consequences. It deals with weighty themes of revenge and guilt, so much so that it's been compared to Greek tragedies. But make no mistake, Revanche isn't some drawn-out melodrama. It's a taut thriller with loads of suspense and brilliant pacing. Number 3 is John Woo's Hard Boiled. John Woo pioneered a highly stylized action movie subgenre, lovingly referred to as gun fu. Hong Kong is the perfect place to film a detective story. Its glowing neon signs and dark alleyways give way to a long coastline dotted with skyscrapers, like the Chinese Miami Vice. The jazzy soundtrack fits perfectly with the ultra-cool gunslinger motif. It's also the most impressively choreographed movie I've recently seen next to The Raid 2 Redemption and John Wick. And of course, these two movies would have never existed without Hard Boiled or John Woo.
Nunca había oído algo así.
Oiga, ¿ese es el Pigmenio Cruz?
Sí, es.
Sin llevarle más que una canción, un pedazo de mi corazón, sin llevarle más nada que un beso, violento, travieso, amargo y dulzón.
Number 2 is Gueros. Gueros is a road movie about 3 teens during the student strikes of 1999 who go off in search of Mexican folk rocker Epigmenio Cruz. It somehow manages to be effortlessly cool while maintaining a sense of self-awareness. It's a love letter to cinema, but also a condemnation of the elitist culture that surrounds it. Alonso Ruiz Palacios perfectly captures rudderless adolescent malaise in the tradition of Slacker, Stranger Than Paradise, and Francis Ha. Like those movies, I can tell I'll revisit Gueros with a newfound appreciation every time. And my number 1 favorite foreign hidden gem is Tokyo Drifter. You can tell that this is one of the movies that directly informed Tarantino's style for Kill Bill. It's a 60s Technicolor explosion of violence with ultramod set pieces and a flippantly cool disregard for convention. It's a blasphemous mix of high art and schlock that will not disappoint. See it when you're in the mood for something truly groovy. That does it for me. I hope you found some movies you may not have heard of and want to check out. Do you have a favorite hidden gem of a movie? Let me know in the comments. I'm always looking out for more recommendations.